Welcome to 100 Songs That Define Heavy Metal. I am your host, Brian Slagel. I am the CEO of Metal Blade Records. We have a new sponsor here at 100 Songs That Define Heavy Metal. It's the Metal Blade Museum and Store, located in Las Vegas, Nevada, right near the Strip. We have a ton of stuff in there from 43 years of Metal Blade. We've got Metallica stuff, we've got Slayer stuff, we've got Gwar, we've got Lizzie Borden. We've got tons and tons of stuff in there. We've got vinyl that you can look at for old stuff. We've got a ton of artifacts. We also have a lot of metal bands too that Metal Blade has worked with, like Deep Purple and Alice Cooper and Stars and Guns N' Roses and Thin Lizzy. So there's a lot of great artifacts there. It really is the ultimate heavy metal museum. And recently, we also have moved our Metal Blade retail store into the museum. So that's in the first part. When you first walk in, the store is there. Free to get into the store. You got to pay to get into the museum. But for more information, go to metalblade.com/museum. Before we start today, it's very important to recognize that we're recording this the day after the great Ace Frehley has passed away. And I wanted to mention that because for me, as a 14-year-old kid, Kiss was my first ever favorite band. And of course, Ace was such an integral part of Kiss, an amazing guitar player. And if it wasn't for Kiss, they really were the ones that helped me develop my love for heavy music. And a lot of what they did and inspired me to do is very important. So it's a very sad week losing Ace. So rest in peace, and please listen to Kiss, one of the greatest guitar players of all time. So that said, we're going to talk about something a little bit different. This episode is going to talk about some death metal stuff, but some very melodic death metal from 1995. We're going to talk 6 Feet Under, Lycanthropy from their amazing Haunted album. But first up, as always, let's see what Martin Popoff has to say.
All right, nice one here, Brian. 6 Feet Under, Lycanthropy. This goes all the way back to the debut. This is a band that has 14 albums by this point, recording for Metal Blade the entire time, but this goes back to the Haunted album, September 26, 1995. So this was released even just before Chris Barnes left Cannibal Corpse. He is the leader and the visionary of this band, but of course we've got Alan West guitars, Terry Butler bass, Greg Gall drums on here. His vocals are such a centerpiece here. They've been described as bowel-shuddering roars. Very non-melodic. He's got a very monotone sort of style. It is amusing to listen to. But what a great song. Key track on this record. It is so hypnotically catchy. This is a slow album. This, in total, this almost sounds like Metallica's Black Album, all of the doomy parts of that album. This is a doom album. You could have put some Ozzy bleeding kind of doomy person on top of these songs, and you would just think it's a doom album. So Chris really has this vision that he wants to make this really accessible, almost like death and roll. So it almost gives you that Unleashed, Entombed sort of vibe, from Swedish death metal. But it's just really well put together. I love the closing sequence on here where you've got that military beat punctuating this really hypnotic riff. And then we go into some of the opening music again. And it's just a very groovy drum situation you've got from Greg Gall on here. The hi-hat's a little bit open. It's just such a catchy, great commercial heavy metal riff on here. And yeah, what a cool band, interesting band. I mean, they actually get heavier and more extreme as time goes on. This was just a kind of a shocking vision back in 1995 for this. And of course, they're known for the whole Graveyard Classics thing as well, where you've just got this almost comical chemistry of what this band wants to do and what Chris wants to do in front of. He's such a character, and it's such a great voice. But like I say, it's this sleepy, pot smoking kind of gruff voice that's just this monotone that rolls through it, and he's very high up in the mix. Great music, great song, just really, really quality songwriting for these guys. So yeah, Lycanthropy from Haunted, September 26, 1995.
Thanks, Martin. Love what he says there about the melodicy of, is that a word? We'll figure it out. Of the music and the record, and even the vocals too. We'll get into it a lot with Chris, because that was the thing for me about this record, was that even though he's singing the low death metal style vocals, you can still understood what he says, and there's melody in there too. So
this episode is brought to you by Credit Karma. When it comes to your money, Credit Karma keeps you ahead of the game. You can count on Credit Karma to keep up with your financial needs as they evolve, helping you monitor your progress and giving you personalized recommendations so you can make strides towards your goals. Make sure you're on the right track. no matter where you are on your financial journey. Intuit Credit Karma. Karma you can count on. Download today.
Every sip of Coca-Cola brings you closer to the excitement of the FIFA World Cup 26. Because nothing compares to the joy. So grab a Coke and drink in the FIFA World Cup 26. No purchase necessary. 13 plus in 50 U.S. states and D.C. with a web-enabled device. Ends March 1st with 8 entry periods. Rules at cokeurl.com/soccer rules.
New Year, same extra value meals at McDonald's. So now get 2 snack wraps, plus fries, and a medium soft drink for just $8.
For limited time only. Prices and participation may vary. Prices may be higher in Hawaii, Alaska, and California, and for delivery.
Well, good stuff from Martin as always. Once again, we welcome in our good friend, the legendary producer who has worked with bands like Slayer, Armored Saint, Flotsam and Jetsam, and the band we're talking about today, 6 Feet Under. It's, of course, Mr. Bill Metoyer. How are you, sir?
I am doing okay.
So as I mentioned, we're talking 6 Feet Under today, the song Lycanthropy from their Haunted record, which is the debut album. And you, of course, have worked with them subsequently. In fact, you worked with them on the record follow-up to this one. How was your experience working with Chris and the guys in the band? Because obviously you worked on, like I said, you worked on the follow-up to this record that we're talking about today.
Yeah, well, first of all, Chris is like one of the nicest guys that you'd ever want to meet. You know, you listen to his voice and his lyrics and you wouldn't think that, but he's a great person. And then Mr. West was in the band at that time. Alan was just a crack up to be around. So no, it was great. Got to go to Florida and do it there with you. So that was one of the highlights.
Yeah, there were. That's why I did produce a bunch of their records, because it was fun. It was super fun to do, and I got to work with legendary guys like you. And on this first record, we worked, of course, with Scott Burns, the legendary death metal guy from down in Florida, who's also a super nice, chill guy. So those sessions were really easy. And I mean, as a producer, when you go into a session and they're easy, pretty easy, that generally means it's going to be a good record.
Yeah, and by the way, I was jealous that I didn't get to work on that first record, but thank God I at least did the next couple. The studios over there that you've always chose to work in are pretty nice too. So. Yeah,
we've been talking a lot about More Sound Studios lately because so many great records were made down there, and we of course did this record down there, which is why Scott was involved, because Scott was kind of, well, I mean, I don't want to say the house engineer per se, but he was kind of that, and obviously,
it was like me and Track Record.
Yeah, exactly, and he'd obviously worked with Chris and Cannibal and stuff too. But the thing that I always think is really interesting about this particular band, and again, we're talking about mid-90s. This is 1985 when metal was supposed to be dead, and it clearly wasn't, because the underground was doing really well. But here you have a death metal band that, instead of sounding like all the other death metal bands with, fast music or thrashy music, this was like kind of slowed down, very traditional heavy metal music in the background with, of course, Chris singing over it. But even his vocals were a little bit different. You could understand everything he said, and there's a lot of melody, and it was a lot different.
Yeah, when it came to working with his vocals, you'd listen to him and you go, oh my God, it's like, how can you even understand this guy? But yeah, when it comes to Chris, he did go overboard to make sure that you could at least try to hear every single syllable that he did. I think he did a good job on this song for sure.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time. That was probably really the most amount of time in the studio. Making the music was pretty easy. They're all good players, and they knew they'd rehearsed a lot, so they were pretty well rehearsed when they came in. But I spent a lot of time with Chris on the vocals, just because as a fan, I wanted people to understand what he's saying, and we worked with him, and he wanted to do that as well. He wanted people to understand and not just go, it's early death metal, just but they worked really hard at it because it was slower. He could enunciate better too, and we did like I said, we spent a lot of time making it right so that people could hear it and sound good. And I didn't listen to this record for quite a while. I listened to it. I go, it actually sounds really good, and Chris sounds really good for what he was doing, especially, again, early on. This is mid-'90s, so this is way before the melodic metal of, bands like today, like Amon Amarth, where, you can pretty much understand what most of Johann's singing.
Yeah, that's the first thing that I noticed when I did listen to that record. Is, my God, you could really understand everything that that Chris is saying. That impressed me the most, that's for sure.
It fits my body in the night, hear the howling, screaming, flesh in the bone, bleeding, eternal horror, dying in the darkness. Now one of us, eaten by the wolf. Now one of us.
Yeah, it was definitely, we spent a lot of time doing that, and again, working with Scott Burns was just a blast, because he, and it's just, again, funny how people perceive people from the outside, right? Because here's Scott Burns, who's like the nicest, most normal, very down to earth, regular guy, and he's producing all this crazy death metal stuff. And he was the godfather of death metal production, basically, because he did all that early stuff. And it's always interesting when you sit down and talk to a guy like that. You would never, if you just meet him on the street, like him and his family, you'd go like, oh, he's just a nice family man. He's probably a lawyer or doctor. It's like, no, he's a death metal producer.
I have never met him in person.
For some reason, I thought, well, yeah, I guess because we weren't in Tampa for the follow-up, so that's probably part of it. But right about then is when he kind of got out of it, because you had a family, and being, as engineer and producer's hours are pretty insane. It's like, okay, I'll see you in 4 to 8 weeks when this record's done, because you're in the studio all the time.
Sometimes it wasn't all that lucrative, so yeah, it was really tough back then.
Yeah, back then definitely was not. That's why it was amazing. I mean, we got so lucky. Certainly, my area got so lucky because we had you and Trek Record in LA. Which, if it wasn't for that, God knows if we would have been able to put any of these records out, or they would. It sounded horrible probably, but having a nice studio helped us in LA, and consequently, in Tampa, having more sound. And then, later on for 6 Feet Under, going down to Criteria, which is, world famous studio. It's always funny when we're in Criteria, we're in there doing our death metal stuff. And, there's all these famous people and Ferraris and Marcialagos and everything in the parking lot for all these pop and rap stars, and we're in there doing death metal. But yeah, it's lucky enough, and I think that's another reason why a lot of these records became so successful, because they actually sounded really good, because we were working with really good people in really nice studios.
Yeah, and the studios were nice enough to let us take the time, especially, I know it was like that at Track Record. Thank God for Mr. Tom Murphy, who owned the studio at that time. I had known him for years, He was one of my teachers when I went to recording engineering school, so it was a blessing.
Big time. And same with the Morris brothers, who owned Morris Sound in Tampa, because it's a really nice studio, and they were still doing soundtracks and orchestras and all these things that made them money, but they were nice enough to let all of us crazy death metal people come in there and make a bunch of records in a really nice studio. And they were so nice about it. It's cool now. I mean, we've talked about it a lot with Mark Lewis when he's been on, because we've probably talked about 4 or 5 records in the last, couple months of episodes that were all recorded at Morris Sound. And now it's owned by TSOL now. They own it, but it's a historical landmark in Tampa now. They have a big sign outside of it with the historical thing, and they had a whole Morris Sound Studios Day down there. They invited me down for that. I wish I could have gone, but it wasn't in my schedule.
I saw the pictures of the signs. Pretty cool.
The other weird thing too about 6 Feet Under, specifically in the mid-'90s, they were huge. Like, they were, at this point in time, they were bigger than Cannibal Corpse was, and bigger than all the other underground metal bands. And they were selling, in the hundreds of thousands of records, which was kind of unheard of in the mid-'90s. Again, this is 95, and 95, 96, 97, metal was pretty much considered dead. Rock Hard magazine, which is the big magazine, German heavy metal magazine, it's been around forever, still is around. And they had they had a cover which had a gravestone that said heavy metal, born 1969, died, I think it was 1996. And it's like, wow, when Rock Hard says it's dead, that's kind of frightening.
Yeah, it was pretty scary back in those days. I certainly remember.
But that's why it's a little going back and listening to some of the stuff that we all made in the mid 90s. And I argue a lot for 90s metal music. You know, a lot of people say, it wasn't really anything good came out. I mean, I just look at what we were releasing in the 90s at Metal Blade, and we had, Cannibal Corpse, 6 Feet Under, Guar, Merciful Fate, 6 Feet Under, and a lot of those records are really, really good records. And especially when you talk about Merciful Fate and King Diamond, it's like, hey, go back and listen to those records. I think a lot of those records stand up with the stuff that King and Merciful Fate did in the 80s, and it's kind of getting more love now that because the 90s are kind of cool again, sort of. So it's good to see. But back in the day, it was interesting.
Yeah, it was a lot different. I mean, hell, the way that we recorded things way back then, you don't do that anymore. So there was something magic about everybody being in the studio together, and that doesn't happen very often anymore. There's people are recording records and everybody's in a different country. So
yeah, it was fun too, because I love, so much of what this podcast is about is education. And, it's called 100 Songs That Define Heavy Metal, because a lot of these songs and stuff are, records from the 70s that made heavy metal what it is today. And all these were recorded in the 70s. And that's when, everybody had to man your fader, right?
Yeah.
When the part comes up. And I always thought that was fun. I used to love doing that. And you get everybody in the band and everybody around like, okay, here's your 1 or 2 faders, and, pull it up in this point. And it's like, everybody has to work right. Otherwise it's going to take a ton of time to do. But I love that. And now, of course, it's all Pro Tools. You don't get to do any of that stuff anymore.
Yeah. Now everything is on a grid and copying and pasting, and everything sounds the same to me now. So that was back in the good old days. It was a pain in the ass, you fucked up, you had to do it again, So.
Yeah, well, you made it a point, this interesting point that we've thought that every other producer we've had on this podcast has made the same point, is that everything today sounds the same. Like there's no unique sounds as much anymore, because you can just get whatever drum sound you want, and everything sounds. I mean, there are certainly bands that have different sounds that are doing it the right way, but a lot of things sound the same, which is kind of sad.
It's very sad. I think I told you before, sometimes I'd be listening to the metal station at Sirius, and I think I'm hearing one band doing a block of 4 songs, then at the end you find out it's 4 different artists. I'm like, wow, this is kind of sad. Makes you start thinking about the old days. In the old days we had fun too, but then again we're all a bunch of fucking kids.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. But I do think that now there are bands that's the thing, is if you can sound different and kind of set yourself aside from everybody else, you're going to be successful. But yeah, there's just too much of the same thing. And I tell bands all the time, because I think what happens a lot now is that bands just go, okay, I love let's say Black Dahlia Murder, because I hear a lot of bands that sound like Black Dahlia Murder. Like they all sound like Black Dahlia Murder. It's like, take whatever your influences are and use them, but sound yourself or sound something different, because we've all heard that. And I'm sure it can be successful in the short term, but we all want to hear something unique and different.
And that's why we were lucky to be a part of the early scene where these bands that you signed and we worked with were creating their own way, so that helped a lot.
100%. Well, as always, my friend, thank you for doing this. We'd love to have you do it, and I'm sure we will see you again soon.
Sounds good. And I do have something to plug that I didn't last.
Please. I
somehow stumbled into becoming a part of a record label. We've talked before about the podcast that we have, the Candle Power Hour. And that turned into Candle Power Records. And we actually put out our first release a few weeks ago, compilation record of a bunch of LA bands. It's called Imperial Highway. Sounds kind of familiar, starting a record label.
Yeah, a little bit, right? Yeah, a little bit.
With a compilation. And, we just found some good bands from the area. That's why it's called Imperial Highway, representing Los Angeles. There's bands like Heavenly Trip to Hell, Hill Block's View, Scum Love, who works at Schecter Guitars for A&R. He does Judas Priest Turbo Lover. A lot of people out there know Scum. He's pretty big out here. And Vinny Appice. He was in a band called Scream Taker, and their cut Stone Cold is on it. It's very Sabbathy, probably my favorite song off the record. And our friend Roy Z, the guy Mr. Z, who's an incredible guitar player, produced Judas Priest and
Bruce Dickinson.
Bruce Dickinson. So, we've been buddies for 30 years, and he was in a band called El Guitarro, and The Magic Leaves, and one of their songs is on it. So, yeah, look for it.
Nice.
It's on Candle Power Records through Electrocast Records. That's distributed by Virgin.
What's the website?
Candle Power Records is the website. But you can look up Candle Power Records, Imperial Highway, and it's on Spotify, Apple, all the normal streaming services. So check it out.
Good. Yeah, please support independent music. It's very, very important. And that's awesome you're doing that, Bill. And like I said, we'll see you soon.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot.
The new year brings new health goals and wealth goals. Protecting your identity is an important step. Your info is in endless places that could expose you to identity theft, leading to lost funds. LifeLock monitors millions of data points per second. If your identity is stolen, our restoration specialists will fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Resolve to make identity health and wealth part of your New Year's goals with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit lifelock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
All right. You know this next man from Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, because he was the original singer for Cannibal Corpse and lyricist as well. And of course, you know him as the main man from 6 Feet Under, which is what we're going to talk about today. Mr. Chris Barnes, how are you, sir? Death metal legend, I might add.
Good seeing you, Bri. Glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to do this song, by the way, because, well, of course I love it, but I also think, the whole thing about this podcast, 100 songs that define heavy metal, like what songs define it? And here we are with something that's unique in a lot of different ways. I mean, it's 1995 when metal's supposedly dead, and everybody's like writing it off, and it's never coming back again. But meanwhile, the underground is going completely insane and doing you guys were doing big numbers, and in a large part keeping metal alive. And if it wasn't for bands like 6 Feet Under, Cannibal Corpse, who knows what would have happened. And also making things that are so creative too, like this song, which I have many layers that I want to get into about this song in particular. But let me start by saying, so you're in Cannibal Corpse and doing your thing there, and then you have this idea to do something a little bit different. Like, where did that idea come from?
Well, it was really kind of born on the Complete Control tour in '92 that Cannibal Corpse did with Obituary, Malevolent Creation, and Agnostic Front. And it was our first big national U.S. tour that we did. At that time, there was a side project that Trevor from Obituary did with the guys from Napalm Death called Meat Hook Seed. And I thought it was really cool that they kind of combined both bands and kind of got together and did this side project. So when I got on the tour, and I remember the date it was in August, pretty much like the first 2 weeks of the tour. And I'd gotten to talk to Trevor, and I was like, man, I really thought that was a killer side project. And I had the idea that I wanted to do a side project at that time as well. And I was going to ask you if you wanted to do it, but you already had something going on. And he was like, oh, you should ask Big Alan West. He's got some songs that he's had for a while. He's looking to do something too. So I hadn't met Alan even on the tour after 2 weeks. And Trevor just walked me on their bus and went in the back, and Alan was hanging out. Trevor introduced me to him, and we became friends and started talking. And at that point, I was I mean, after that tour, I was going back and forth. I was living in Buffalo still. Cannibal was still in Buffalo. So I was going down to Tampa and hanging out with my girlfriend at that time. And there is a small knit community in Tampa as far as the music scene and death metal scene went. So everyone kind of knew each other. And me and Al started just demoing out songs, which became Haunted. We started demoing out songs. I'd do vocals on a 4-track in his friend's trailer in some really weird section of Brandon or somewhere. It was just a really like fun thing to do at first, and something to do when I was in Florida and just working on stuff. So it started like that.
The thing that I loved about it was it's so different. Like, you were taking death metal and putting it in a completely different area, where before, it was either super heavy, a lot of double kicks and fast, or very thrashy, and that was the music was always very heavy, but in a kind of faster, thrashy, or even heavier mode that death metal became. But this was different. This was slower, kind of more traditional metal. And I get that with the music, but then the vocals on top of that, it was so much more melodic, and you're singing a little bit slower. You can understand what you're saying, and the vocals were really, really interesting to me. It's like something I'd never heard at all in the death metal scene. I was like, wow, this is really cool, and this is very different. Up until that time, I don't think anybody done anything like that.
Well, I think I started to enunciate and pronounce my lyrics within my vocals during the writing of The Bleeding. I changed up my vocal style. The music changed a little bit. It wasn't so chon, 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 chon. It was a little more musical, a little more technical. So I didn't feel like that really deep guttural vocal approach with, the unintelligible vocals. I think now people can understand those vocals a little more and hear the lyrics in them. But then it was really foreign to people how I started that vocal sound. So like when The Bleeding was being written, I was trying to place the vocals in a spot within the music like I always did, but make it more for normal people to be able to understand the lyrics. And really most of the lyrics for the songs on Haunted, I think everything but maybe 4 songs were written immediately, like after I finished writing The Bleeding. Like I started writing the rest of the songs for Haunted 5 minutes after I finished that album. So it kind of transferred over in that the music on Haunted and that the 6 Feet Under stuff then was, like you said, more rhythmic and less fast riffy. It was more like slow, kind of doomy, but rhythmic. And I felt like the vocals had to be intelligible for that, but still heavy. So I kind of work that way anyways. I just really want the vocals to match what I feel the music needs, and just kind of ice the cake with it, with the vocal sound. And it's challenging to do that. And I never wanted to like just stay in one place. And it's, like you said, more kind of a traditional sound and a little bit more melodic to the music.
Big time. And again, we're talking 1995, and I think that's really important to mention because of where music was in 1995. And the other interesting thing about certainly this record and 6 Feet Under in general was you were doing what kind of was happening in 90s with heavy music, like no leads, just a lot of rhythm stuff, a very melodic stuff, and especially for death metal. This was, again, this record in particular, I mean, it's super groundbreaking in the fact that you've just done so many different things on it that have, again, led to not only death metal, but a lot of bands that have done stuff after that. And again, holding up this torch in 1995, which was very difficult. And I remember being in the studio making the record. It was a really easy record to make because you guys, there's a nice chemistry going between the band. The music flowed really well. It was pretty simple. Of course, Scott Burns is a legendary engineer and made it all sound really good. But it was easy for me because, all the stuff that I produced before that, I never produced any death metal stuff, but I produced all the early 80s metal stuff. And this was kind of the same thing, just without guitar solos, more or less, which was the thing in the mid 90s.
Yeah, yeah, and I think like even in Cannibal, man, every song didn't have a guitar solo. It was different, a different approach to metal. I think that's really what helped kind of keep metal going. I mean, it was a different form of metal. It was exciting. It was a little more new. And I think you did. People don't want to call Slayer death metal, but without Slayer, there probably wouldn't be death metal. So that was really the early beginnings of it. You were producing some pretty amazing stuff back then, man. And I wanted your help because I had always admired you and still do, So.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It was same here. Those were all those records we did were a blast, a super blast. But I want to delve into this song in particular because I just love this song so much, and it's one of the top, whenever you look on any list or Spotify or whatever, this is always one of the top songs from 6 Feet Under. But it's really interesting. I hadn't listened to it for a while. Listening to it again, I just like the dynamics of the song where everything kind of builds up. There's a guitar, and then there's another guitar, and the bass, and the drums, and the vocals kick in. It's this real natural thing. And again, the vocals for me on this were probably the most melodic thing that I had heard in any death metal prior to this.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, man. I like this tune a lot, and the storytelling too within this song is pretty cool, and it's an idea I had for a long time. I mean, probably going back to like '86, the lyrics for this song. So
I wanted to ask you a question too about this. So in the song, because obviously the song is about werewolf, and werewolf is one of the early terms is lycanthrope.
Yeah.
And you sing in some of lycanthrope, but then the song is also called Lycanthropy, which is also kind of the lycanthrope is the werewolf, but I guess lycanthropy is the mental.
Yeah, the disease of becoming a werewolf. Yeah. So
Yeah.
Yeah, or the affliction. Yeah.
That dichotomy is really interesting. I'm assuming that was done intentionally.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like what it is, right? Because it's like someone becoming a werewolf, and just the classic horror. I mean, that's one of the earliest horror movies, right? Is the werewolf or the Wolfman. I always loved the movie American Werewolf in London. I thought that was such a great movie. I still watch it. I mean,
that's a classic.
Yeah, so maybe that inspired it a little bit. It's just like, the part where he's in the apartment going through the changes from man to werewolf.
Yeah, and that's the thing too that I find with a lot of your lyrics, but specifically this song too, is just when I listen to it, you can see it all happening in your head because it's so pronounced the way the story is and how it's told and the sequence it's told, and it becomes very visual for me and certainly a lot of people. When you're doing these lyrics and trying to paint these pictures, how can you, I guess it's just a gift maybe, I don't know, but you're able to like paint these pictures that people can actually see the lyrics as opposed to just listening to it.
I've always liked storytelling and well-written books or stories that kind of just immerse you into what's being told to you. I've learned to kind of do that for myself when I'm writing, is like make myself feel what I'm talking about. So I don't know. I like doing that, and that's challenging to me as well, is to make it feel like you're actually able to be there when you're reading it or listening to the lyrics.
And you are, of course, hailed as, one of the original death metal singers. And, a lot of people look up to you as to your singing style and how you created it and invented it, because it was quite a bit different from a lot of the other death metal singers. I've always asked this for guys that sing like this. Like, where does that come from? How do you learn that? And especially when you were first starting out, because it wasn't like there was a whole host of people that you could say, oh yeah, all these people are doing it.
No, they were doing a different style of death metal vocals. They were doing the stuff that was inspired by Jeff Becerra and Possessed. Like Chuck actually took his vocal approach from that style of death metal singing and built upon it. I didn't have that tone to my voice. I didn't have the ability to sing like Jeff Tate or Rob Halford or anybody like that. So it was really like a lot of time behind the mic and kind of like finding my way with time, like 3 hours a day, mostly 7 days a week for like 3-5 years every single day. And it was just zeroing in on a sound that I heard from the music I was singing to, like the guitar distortion. And I just wanted to like harmonize or blend that sound I was hearing in my head and in the room together in the rehearsal space. And so it was really time that reinforced and gave me the ability to do that. That's how I kind of invented that guttural vocal sound. It really started at the end of Eaten Back to Life, when the last song on that album that we wrote was Buried in the Backyard. And I think that's the start of that for me. And then it progressed after that, where the music became a lot heavier after Eaten Back to Life for Butchered at Birth. So I really zeroed in on that feel and that sound and tone.
Yeah, and then you get into 6 Feet Under, and kind of it's a whole different style and a whole different tone, and it's clearly the same singer. You can tell it's the same singer, but I just noticed, especially being in the studio and working with you, it's like how different that is. And this is what people ask, because I understand that not everybody's a fan of death metal. A lot of people don't understand or get the vocals. They ask me you could ask me the question about, if you're not a metalhead, and period, about any sort of metal, but what's the difference, between a good band and not such a good band and all these death metal bands? It's melody. It's the same thing with, Slayer in the early days. It's melody. There's melody there. There's melody in Cannibal Corpse, but there's certainly, so much melody in, not only this song, but in all the 6 Feet Under records you guys made. There's so much melody and classic heavy metal riffs, and it's like classic heavy metal with just a little heavier vocal on it, which is why I always thought that was really cool. And what you guys did with 6 Feet Under was so different than anything else.
Yeah. And it just really following that riff and following the vibe of the sound of the music and where I was at that point. And that's true. I mean, a lot of people, especially then, didn't understand the death metal vocal style. You got that a lot in the press when people reviewed stuff that I was doing. They were like, killer music, but I don't understand the vocalist, what he's saying at all, So I listen to criticism. I always have. I mean, no matter if it bothers me or not, but I kind of understood that something maybe needed to be adjusted and to make it more accessible to regular metalheads, So, and I like that. It was challenging to me, and I dig that people like what I've done now. I mean, it's very nice to hear compliments and stuff like that. So,
well, it's always interesting. I noticed that as, same thing for me, like as you get older, like say more and more people have more respect for you, just because you're still around after all this time. Well, if they're still doing it this late, it must be still pretty good, right?
Yeah, there's still people that tend to not like me too. So, I mean, that makes me feel like I'm still doing something right. So, I mean,
hey, any reaction, you want to have a reaction, right? I talk a lot about, like, for a band, for example, like Ghost, it's you love it or hate it, and that's kind of what you want. You want a reaction, like the reaction, like, it's okay,
right?
That's not what you want to hear. You want to hear like either, oh my God, this is great, or oh my God, I hate it.
Right.
So I sort of get that sort of
It's
thing.
like any type of art, right? I mean, even a painting that an artist does, it's just like, it might really upset one person, and then some person might look at it and be like really amazed by it. So like, that's very true, is you don't want someone to just look and walk past it,
Yeah, exactly.
It has to give you some kind of a reaction. I mean, great art, it forces you to think and have internal dialogue or dialogue with people that you know or don't know,
100%. And it kind of goes back to the famous story about Frank Zappa seeing Alice Cooper for the first time at the Whiskey in LA, and they went on and cleared the room in 5 minutes because it was so weird and bizarre and over the top. And Frank Zappa goes, if they can clear a room in 5 minutes, I want to sign them, because that's a reaction. It's hard to do that.
Yeah.
Funny story, by the way. I have to tell you this because it's kind of been haunting my life the last week or two. But my girlfriend's got a 13-year-old daughter, and her 13-year-old daughter and her 3 other 13-year-old friends have just recently discovered Cannibal Corpse. It's now their favorite band. They now worship them. So
Nice.
how unusual is it to hear that all these 13-year-old girls are now obsessed with Cannibal Corpse?
That's wild.
Yeah, hey, next generation, right? But it's just kind of funny out of the blue. And I didn't have anything to do with it at all. So they just found it TikTok, like all these kids find out all this stuff is through TikTok. So it's pretty insane. You guys are working on some new music, as always. So give us a little bit of an update on what's going on there.
Oh, yeah. Well, the new album's done. I finished vocals last week down in Miami at the Hit Factory, or Criteria. It's hard to not say the Hit Factory because it was,
I know,
right? It was the Hit Factory through all those years that we were there. And then they reverted back to Criteria, which is the ultimate studio. You could probably say more things that weren't there. It's easier to say than everything has ever been done there. So I love it there. It was great. It's a really interesting album. I said it before. I mean, well, me and Jack wrote, this time he wrote half of the lyrics on the album. I wrote the other half. And that's been really interesting for me too, to collaborate as a lyricist with someone.
I would talk about Jack Owen.
Yes. So
Cannibal Corpse.
me and Jack collaborated on, Eating Back to Life, on Shredded Humans, and his writing style and his storytelling is very immersive as well. And I love the way Jack writes. I mean, he's been a really amazing addition to 6 Feet Under as far as progressing the band and keeping things interesting. So this album, it encompasses just a lot of everything we've done. I mean, even going back to Haunted, there are some songs that are very rhythmic and more on the simple, straightforward side. And then there's some songs are very thrashy, which kind of came into play on the last album, on Killing for Revenge, where they're more thrashy bass type of death metal. And then there's like some songs, one of the songs really reminds me of like something we would have done on The Bleeding when I was in Cannibal Corpse, when we were both in Cannibal Corpse. So it's really, really cool. And I think we haven't mixed the album yet. That starts next month in November. Mark Lewis is going to be mixing this album. So I'm going to be working with him again. We haven't worked with him since Undead and Unborn.
And we all know Mark on this show because he's one of the main guys that we talk to about production. So our audience is very familiar with Mark.
Yeah, and I really liked his mix that he did the new Dying Fetus record, but the last one, I was really a fan of that. And we actually reconnected on 6 Feet Under's tour earlier this past year, and when we were in Nashville, and we talked backstage, and we had a really good conversation. So it was sticking with me for a few months after that. Like, man, I just really loved that production he did on the Fetus album, and it'd be great to work with him again. So I kind of connected with him after that tour a couple months after, and he was like, oh man, I'm down, let's do this. So he's really open to explore the production and the mix in an interesting way. So that complements these songs because they are very diverse from each other. And I don't like blanket productions. I think I mentioned to you, I was like, years ago, I was like, how come a song, one song can't have one production, like with a different snare sound, for instance, and why can't that song have another sound to it on the same album? And I understand there has to be some cohesiveness throughout the album, but I'm a big fan of making each song its own like entity. We're not going to go so far with it like that, but I've always respected bands and albums producers that have been able to do that and not just do a blanket production to make it sound more organic, I guess,
And I think it's easier to do that now too, because it's
the technology.
The technology there. The songs come out, and songs come out at different parts, and people listen to music in different ways. They're not particularly listening to the whole record in its entirety sometimes. So it kind of works. So one last thing I wanted to ask you. So you've worked with two absolute music icons with 6 Feet Under, Ice-T and Iggy Pop. What was that like?
Yes. A lot of people don't know that Iggy Pop did a guest appearance on Death Rituals on the song Shot in the Head. So, like, they're like, oh, I thought that was you on that voice recording. I'm like, no, thank you, but no. It's probably, in my opinion, the greatest front man of all time. That was incredible and such a genuine, nice person. Obviously, we sat in the studio with Iggy after that was done when we were doing another album, and he came in and we were all talking, and he was just such a genuine, kind person, and he still is. So that was incredible for me. Just, when we asked him, Chris Carroll asked him, was like, would we be interested? And he's like, I don't know, let me call him and ask him. And he was like, Iggy's in. That's what I remember Chris Carroll telling us. And we were like, oh my God. But yeah, it was a great experience doing that, and different too. It wasn't like a vocal part where he was singing in the song. He's an actor as well. And I've been a fan of the parts that he's done in movies like the Jim Jarmusch film Dead Man. That was just a really cool scene when he was in that. So I always had that in the back of my head. I'd like to do something like that. Really interesting working with him on that in that way. And then with Ice, that was cool, man, because you asked me, you were like, when we were getting ready to go in the studio for True Carnage, we were in rehearsals, and you said, is there anybody that you'd like to collaborate with? And I just said Ice-T. And I was like, I'm just going to go right for the top here. It's not a doubt it'll ever happen. And we got an email from Ice's manager, and again, Ice is in. It was just like, what? Like, okay, cool, man. So I wrote the lyrics for that song, One Bullet Left, and I left the spots where I wanted him to come in and sing. And it's pretty wild, man. I mean, we went to the Hit Factory, New York, me and you, and went to meet him. And what a wild few hours that was. I mean, from the minute of him walking down the sidewalk and meeting us. And I had met him in 94 when we played Milwaukee Metal Fest. I was at the airport picking up my girlfriend, waiting for her to get off the plane. And Ice walked up to me and he was like, "You're Chris Barnes." And I was like, "What?" I'm like, "Yeah." I'm like, "You're Ice-T, He's like, "Man, I'm listening to your stuff. I'm trying to understand what you're saying. I'm getting it. I get it, man. I fucking love it." Or, I don't know exactly what he said. It was along those lines. And it's like, "Man, I listen to your stuff. OG is my favorite, rap album." I was like, I love it. I mean, I listened to that album 24 hours straight for probably 2 years. I mean, it's one of my all-time favorites. So when we got in the studio in New York for him to record his vocal parts for One Bullet Left, it was really kind of magical, wasn't it? I mean, we were out in the green room or whatever lounge, and he went in to start recording his stuff, and he didn't even have anything written. I mean, we sent him a tape of it, and he came to the studio with nothing. And he went into the studio, wrote the lyrics, and recorded it. We were sitting there. It was like, oh, he's almost done. You got to get in there and listen to this. It was like within 10 minutes. It was wild, man. So I couldn't really wrap my head around how he did that, but that rap that he does during the vocal part that he does during One Bullet Left is, to me, one of the most amazing things I've ever heard. I can't even believe that we were a part of that. So yeah, so working with Ice and working with Iggy, it just really, really, really memorable points in my career.
Yeah, it was both amazing. Real quickly, the first time I met Ice, we were at Warner Brothers at the same time, and we were at some sort of convention, and somebody walks over to me and says, "Ice-T wants to talk to you." I'm like, "Uh-oh." Did I do something wrong?
Intimidating there.
What happened? I'm like, oh, okay. So I walked over there. He's like, hey, man, I'm a huge fan of what you do. And, all this stuff. And he loved, obviously, mentioned Cannibal Corpse and, loved all the stuff they were doing. I'm like, oh, wow, this is kind of crazy. I said, well, likewise. And that was right around that. I think it was right around the cop killer thing too. So we were kind of dealing with the censorship thing over there and stuff, but he was just awesome and still is super awesome. Well, dude, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. It was amazing, of course. And I'm sure we'll see you soon somewhere.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me, Brian. It's been great talking to you as always, man.
Well, that'll do it. Big thanks to Mr. Chris Barnes for joining us. Mr. Bill Metoyer talking about production. Of course, Martin Popoff and always his amazing look at things and takes. Lizzie Borden for our theme music. And of course, the producer that keeps it all rolling, Mr. Christian Blatt. We will see you guys next episode.
100